Immersed in the tranquil sanctuary of my library, I was lost among ancient economic texts when my brother Blake's voice unexpectedly pierced the silence. "Still burying yourself in these dusty volumes, Evelyn? Don't you ever tire of missing out on the real world?" His tone, a blend of mockery and pity, echoed through the secluded rare book section where I'd been studying a 16th-century treatise on commerce. Looking up, I saw him casually leaning against a mahogany bookshelf. Dressed impeccably in a custom Armani suit, he stood in jarring contrast to my simple librarian attire. His familiar smirk, unchanged since our childhood battles over the dinner table, silently taunted me, the living embodiment of his perpetual arrogance. "Hello, Blake," I responded with practiced composure, carefully returning the fragile parchment to its protective case. "The rare book section isn't your usual stomping ground. Dad sent me to check on you," he continued, straightening his Italian silk tie. "Mom's worried you'll embarrass everyone at their 35th anniversary party tonight." Blake scanned the library's vaulted ceilings with undisguised contempt. A librarian in the family? Dad's still making excuses to his golfing buddies at the country club. "I'm Evelyn Foster, the 36-year-old head librarian at the city's central library. To my family, whose wealth spans 4 generations of finance and industry, my career choice remains an uncomfortable anomaly. Little do they know, my quiet life among ancient texts conceals far more than they could possibly imagine." "I'll be there," I assured him, standing tall amid my beloved books. "And yes, I'll dress appropriately." "Make sure you do," he replied, ostentatiously adjusting his limited edition Rolex. "It's a big night. I'll be announcing Foster Enterprises' latest acquisition. We're officially a major player now." "That's wonderful, Blake." "Congratulations," I said, maintaining a neutral expression despite the knot of anticipation tightening in my stomach. "Thanks," he replied, his voice lacking any genuine warmth. "You know, it's not too late for you to join the actual business world. Our corporate information center could use someone with your filing skills. At least then you'd be contributing something worthwhile to the family name." His condescending remarks about my profession couldn't touch the quiet certainty I harbored inside. I smiled slightly, thinking of the encrypted servers and international operations I directed from my unassuming office. "I'm quite content where I am," I told him with quiet firmness. He shrugged, already bored with our conversation, and added as he turned to leave, "Remember, 6 o'clock sharp. And try not to bring any books this time. It's embarrassing." After his footsteps faded, I waited precisely 5 minutes before slipping back to my office. To casual observers, it appeared to be a typical librarian's workspace: modest desk, reference materials, comfortable chair. But concealed behind a biometric secured panel were cutting-edge security systems and a custom-built computer network that would make most tech companies envious. Locking my door with a soft click, I activated my encrypted workstation and connected to a private server. Within seconds, video conference windows from Osaka, Paris, and Boston materialized on my screen. "Good morning, Miss Foster," greeted Nadine through the crystal-clear connection, her crisp efficiency evident even through the digital interface. "The Lawrence Tech acquisition documents are ready for your final approval." "Thank you, Nadine," I responded, scanning the complex financial projections with practiced ease. "Has legal completed their comprehensive assessment?" "Yes, the terms are ironclad. We're positioned to proceed whenever you give the word." Checking my watch, a subtle Patek Philippe that cost more than most cars but looked unremarkable to the untrained eye, I noted there were still 6 hours until my parents' anniversary celebration. "Schedule the signing for 7:15 tomorrow morning, Nadine, and ensure the press release is ready to go the moment the documents are executed." "Already arranged," she confirmed, though I caught the slight hesitation in her voice. "But are you certain about this timing?" "Your brother's announcement tonight." Thinking of Blake's smug expression and the years of condescending remarks about my little library job, I felt a steely resolve crystallize within me. Tonight I would play the role of dutiful daughter at my parents' anniversary, but tomorrow would be the day I finally stepped into the light, revealing the true extent of my carefully constructed double life. "Absolutely. Tomorrow morning will be perfect," I affirmed with quiet confidence. After concluding the call, I leaned back in my chair, reflecting on the financial empire I had methodically built. Foster Global Ventures, completely unconnected to my brother Blake's Foster Enterprises, had strategically become one of the world's leading private equity firms. Operating through an intricate network of shell companies and carefully structured investments, we had concealed our true scope and influence from public scrutiny. For 8 years, I'd balanced this growing financial powerhouse with my position as head librarian, a role I genuinely loved for its connection to knowledge and history. Yet it also served as the perfect cover. Who would ever suspect that a bookish librarian was quietly orchestrating billion-dollar deals across 3 continents? My phone vibrated with a message from my mother. "Don't forget to do something with your hair, darling. The Bradshaws will be attending tonight." The Bradshaws, another old money family my parents perpetually sought to impress. I sent a brief acknowledgement and began preparing for the evening. My schedule included a private styling appointment and final fitting for a meticulously selected dress. I never flaunted my wealth openly, but I understood perfectly how to play my assigned role when necessary. Arriving at the exclusive salon I discreetly owned, I found it conveniently empty, one of the benefits of controlling the property and maintaining a standing private appointment. Emma, my stylist who remained unaware of my financial empire, greeted me with genuine warmth. "Your usual subtle highlights today?" she asked, running her fingers through my hair. "Something more formal tonight." "Family celebration," I replied as she began her masterful work. While she styled, I discreetly reviewed acquisition updates on my secure phone. The Lawrence Tech deal was proceeding flawlessly. By tomorrow morning, Foster Global Ventures would secure complete ownership of a cutting-edge Asian technology manufacturer, the same company my brother had been unsuccessfully pursuing for nearly 6 months. Emma, making casual conversation, mentioned, "Your brother was in earlier, bragging about some massive company he's buying. Wouldn't stop talking about it." "He's trying to acquire it," I responded with the slightest curl of my lips. "There's quite a significant difference between trying and succeeding." Her eyes met mine in the mirror, sensing something beneath my measured response. Let's just say tomorrow's financial headlines might be quite eye-opening. 4 hours later, I studied my transformed reflection in my townhouse's full-length mirror. The understated librarian had vanished, replaced by someone who could effortlessly navigate the highest echelons of New York society. My custom-designed deep blue dress, quietly expensive but not ostentatious, struck that delicate balance of refined elegance without screaming for attention. My jewelry was minimal yet exquisite, a pair of vintage sapphire earrings that whispered old money rather than shouted new wealth. Most importantly, I looked exactly as my parents would expect, their bookish daughter making a respectable effort to uphold the Foster family image. My phone vibrated with another message, this time from Nadine. "All preparations complete for tomorrow's announcement. Are you certain you don't want to reveal your position tonight? The timing would be dramatic." "No," I typed back, feeling a flutter of anticipation in my stomach. "Let them enjoy their evening. Tomorrow's revelation will be much more effective." As I pulled into the circular driveway of the historic Foster estate in Newport, I couldn't help but notice the row of ostentatious vehicles, Bentleys, Maseratis, and top-end Mercedes, forming a gleaming testament to generations of accumulated wealth. I deliberately parked my modest Audi A4 between 2 luxury sports cars, another calculated choice, respectable enough for a professional woman but not raising questions about a public librarian's salary. Joseph, our family's long-serving butler who had known me since childhood, greeted me at the door with a formal bow that couldn't quite hide his genuine warmth. "Your parents are receiving guests in the main hall, Miss Evelyn," he informed me quietly. As I approached the grand entryway, the sensory landscape of upper-class celebration enveloped me, the sophisticated hum of practiced social banter, crystal champagne flutes meeting in delicate toasts, and the precise notes of a string quartet playing something suitably classical. This was the rarefied atmosphere my parents had breathed their entire lives, a world I had ostensibly stepped away from, though in truth, I'd simply built my own version. "Evelyn, darling. You actually look presentable tonight." My mother's voice, perfectly calibrated to carry without seeming to shout, cut through the ambient noise. Coming from Isabella Foster, this qualified as effusive praise. At 65, my mother remained a striking figure, her silver-streaked dark hair and sculpted features preserved by the best cosmetic surgeons money could buy. She had never forgiven me for choosing dusty books over the family financial empire. Tonight, however, I slipped comfortably into my role, knowing it was merely the prelude to tomorrow's revelation. "Happy 35th anniversary, Mom," I said warmly, kissing her expertly powdered cheek. The subtle scent of her signature French perfume enveloped me momentarily. "You look stunning, as always." "Your father's holding court by the fireplace," she replied, her eyes already scanning the room for more significant guests than her librarian daughter. "Do say hello before you inevitably disappear to find some book." Making my way through the crowd felt like navigating a minefield of forced smiles and condescension. I received the usual air kisses and barely interested inquiries about my little career at the library. These people had watched me grow up, attended my graduation parties, and still couldn't comprehend why anyone with foster blood would choose public service over private wealth. "There she is, my brilliant girl." My father's booming voice carried across the room. Victor Foster stood surrounded by his usual circle of golf partners and business associates, his broad smile showing teeth too perfect to be natural. "Come over here, everyone wants to see you," he called, drawing me into an enthusiastic bear hug that smelled faintly of expensive scotch. I could tell from his slightly loosened tie and overly hearty laugh that he'd been celebrating enthusiastically since early afternoon. "Still hiding away with those dusty books, Evelyn?" William Bradshaw remarked with the particular tone wealthy men reserve for things they find quaint but ultimately worthless. "Yes, still preserving cultural heritage and democratic access to knowledge," I replied with a pleasant smile that masked the sting I still felt at such dismissals. Their indulgent laughter rippled around me, the kind reserved for children or eccentric relatives whose harmless oddities make for amusing dinner conversation. "Speaking of accomplishments," my father interjected, clearly eager to change the subject from his daughter's embarrassing career, "where's Blake? He's got some spectacular news to share tonight." As if choreographed, my brother appeared at that exact moment, champagne flute in one hand and the other adjusting his custom tuxedo cufflinks. The overhead lighting seemed to intentionally catch his Rolex as he moved. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out with practiced authority, his voice instantly commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "If I could have your attention for a special announcement." The room quieted immediately, all eyes drawn to my brother. Blake had always thrived in the spotlight, cultivating the skill since childhood. As some of you already know, Foster Enterprises has been experiencing unprecedented growth this quarter, he began, his voice swelling with self-satisfaction. "Today, I'm incredibly excited to announce our most significant acquisition to date. By this time next week, we will have officially acquired Lawrence Tech and its entire portfolio of cutting-edge patents and technology." Enthusiastic applause erupted around the room. My father's face radiated pride, and my mother discreetly dabbed at the corner of her eye with a monogrammed handkerchief. I sipped my champagne slowly, savoring the moment. "The final paperwork isn't quite signed," Blake continued with exaggerated modesty, "but my sources assure me it's merely a formality. We're ready to move forward immediately." "That's my boy," my father exclaimed, clapping Blake on the shoulder. "Always knew you had the Foster business instinct. A real visionary, just like your old man." As Blake basked in the adulation and congratulations, his gaze eventually found mine across the room. He raised his glass slightly in my direction. "What do you think of that, little sister?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "Ready to admit you chose the wrong path in life?" I met his challenge with practiced calm. "I think," I said carefully, making sure my voice carried just enough, "that there's wisdom in not counting chickens before they're hatched." He laughed dismissively, and several guests joined in. "Always so cautious and academic. That's precisely why you'll never be more than what you are, hiding in your library while the rest of us build something meaningful in the real world." "Perhaps," I conceded with a slight smile. though I do appreciate the value of thorough due diligence in any significant transaction. His expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Blake had always detested when I used business terminology, viewing it as an intrusion into his territory. Due diligence, he scoffed, waving his hand. I've got the top legal team on the East Coast. Everything's been thoroughly vetted and secured. I simply smiled and raised my glass in a small toast. Then I suppose we'll all see how things unfold tomorrow, won't we? The subtle hint in my tone was enough to furrow his brow with momentary confusion. Before he could press further, my mother's voice cut through the tension. Everyone, please proceed to the dining room. Dinner is served. The Foster family dining room was a study in old-world opulence, a 19th-century mahogany table that could seat 30, fine Limoges china passed down through generations, and crystal stemware that reflected the warm glow of antique chandeliers. As we filed toward our assigned seats, I felt a delicious blend of anticipation and satisfaction coursing through me. Less than 12 hours remained before my carefully orchestrated reveal. Taking my designated chair at the far end of the massive table, I stifled a knowing smile at the seating arrangement. My placement, strategically distant from the evening's most prestigious guests and my parents, was a familiar slight that no longer held any sting. While servers presented the first course, Blake dominated the conversation from his position of honor, his voice carrying effortlessly as he detailed his business strategies with rehearsed confidence. I participated minimally, offering polite nods and occasional remarks when directly addressed, otherwise focusing on the impeccably prepared cuisine. Beside me, Caroline Bradshaw leaned closer, her diamond earrings catching the light as she lowered her voice conspiratorially. You were always the brightest in your class at Dalton, Evelyn. Valedictorian, Harvard acceptance, you could have been anything. Why dedicate yourself to public libraries, of all things? I paused thoughtfully, acutely aware that by this time tomorrow, her perception of me would be irrevocably transformed. For now, however, I maintained my carefully constructed persona. The world of books and information is hardly a waste, I explained with measured patience. Libraries teach us that appearances can be deceptive, that beneath the surface often lies unexpected depth and complexity. She shook her head, her expression a blend of confusion and pity. Well, at least Blake is upholding the Foster tradition, she sighed, adjusting her tennis bracelet. It must be terribly difficult watching your younger brother achieve such prominence while you remain, well, invisible in comparison. Not nearly as difficult as you might imagine, I replied, unable to completely suppress the glimmer of amusement in my eyes. The meal progressed with a steady stream of subtle digs and backhanded compliments about my admirable but limited career. Years of practice had made me impervious to such remarks. They rolled off me like water from a well-oiled canvas. As servers presented the dessert course, an elaborately plated chocolate soufflé, Blake rose again, champagne flute held aloft. I'd like to propose another toast to Mom and Dad, he announced, commanding immediate attention, who showed me everything about succeeding in business and creating a lasting legacy. His gaze shifted deliberately in my direction. And to my sister, who, well, demonstrates that not everyone inherits the Foster business instinct. The room responded with polite, restrained laughter. I lifted my glass with the others, my mind already racing ahead to the documents that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of Foster Enterprises and the precisely worded press release scheduled for morning distribution. Later, as guests mingled over coffee and digestifs, Blake cornered me by the dessert table. Enjoying the festivities, he asked with his trademark smirk. It's a beautiful celebration, I replied evenly, concealing the electric anticipation building inside me. Mother and father must be delighted. They are, he preened, adjusting his monogrammed cufflinks. Though imagine how much prouder they'd be if both their children had amounted to something notable. I selected a handcrafted chocolate truffle, examining it thoughtfully. You know, Blake, true success isn't always measured by who attracts the most attention or speaks the loudest. He snorted dismissively. Really? Tell that to my investment portfolio. What's the annual salary for a head librarian these days? 60,000? 70? Enough for these Louboutins, I replied lightly, briefly showing the red-soled shoes partially hidden beneath my dress. I've always been rather good with financial management. He drained his champagne with a single swallow. Well, this has been sufficiently tedious, but I need to network with people who actually matter. The Lawrence Tech acquisition requires some final touches before tomorrow's big announcement. As he strode away, I discreetly retrieved my phone and sent a quick text to Nadine, "Everything prepared for tomorrow morning?" Her response appeared instantly, "All systems go. Press release scheduled for precisely 8 a.m. Would you like to review the final acquisition figures once more?" "Not necessary," I replied, allowing myself a brief smile. "I'll see all the details in tomorrow's financial papers, along with everyone else." The celebration wound down shortly after midnight. As I made my farewell rounds, I weathered one final barrage of well-intentioned but condescending comments about my professional choices. "Darling, do reconsider Blake's generous offer," my mother urged as I kissed her cheek goodbye. "Managing the corporate archives would be so much more befitting someone with your background and family name." "I'll certainly think about it," I assured her smoothly, knowing with absolute certainty that my path led in an entirely different direction. During the quiet drive back to my townhouse, I contemplated the seismic upheaval the coming day would bring. For 8 carefully calculated years, I had constructed my financial empire in absolute secrecy while my family continued to view me as their disappointing daughter who had squandered her potential on public service. In less than 8 hours, they would discover just how profoundly they had underestimated me. The next morning, I arrived at the library precisely at 7 a.m., maintaining the same punctual schedule I'd followed for the past 8 years. My practical heels echoed through the marble corridors, a familiar sound to the handful of early patrons who never questioned why the head librarian maintained such consistent hours. Nadine was already waiting, tablet in hand and not a hair out of place despite the early hour. Within these walls, she played the role of my efficient assistant librarian. Outside, she served as the formidable COO of Foster Global Ventures and one of the most astute financial strategists in the country. She greeted me discreetly as we entered my office. "Everything is prepared," she reported, her voice professionally modulated. "Legal teams are assembled in Osaka, and the press release is queued for distribution in exactly 47 minutes. I set my bag on the desk and activated my secure workstation. "Any updates from Blake's acquisition team?" I inquired, knowing they were simultaneously attempting to finalize their version of the Lawrence deal. "They're gathering now, still entirely confident they'll secure the company," she informed me, unable to completely suppress a knowing smile. I felt a rare moment of unguarded satisfaction as I pictured Blake's impending shock. Let's allow them to maintain that hope for just a little longer. At exactly 7:15 a.m., my private line rang. Mr. Lawrence's chief translator was calling from Tokyo. "Miss Foster, all parties are prepared to proceed." "Excellent. Let's begin the final transactions." The next 17 minutes unfolded in a whirlwind of digital signatures and formal confirmations. By 8 a.m., Foster Global Ventures had officially acquired Lawrence Technologies in its entirety, including all subsidiaries, intellectual property portfolios, and advanced research divisions. "The press release is being distributed now," Nadine announced, her typically composed demeanor showing a hint of excitement. I opened multiple financial news sites on my monitor, watching in real time as our story spread across global platforms. Breaking: Mystery buyer secures Lawrence Tech in surprise move. Financial powerhouse Foster Global Ventures reveals founder's identity. Wall Street stunned as Harvard-educated librarian named as billion-dollar investment mogul. My phone vibrated incessantly. The first call, predictably, came from Blake. "What the actual hell is this?" he exploded without greeting, his voice a volatile mix of disbelief and fury. "Good morning to you too, Blake," I replied with deliberate calm. "I assume you've seen the financial news? This is completely impossible. Foster Global Ventures? You can't be, there's no way you're the founder and CEO. Actually, I am. Have been for 8 years now." I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. "Though I understand your confusion. After all, I'm just a book-loving librarian, right? I could practically hear his mental gears grinding to process this new reality, papers shuffling frantically in the background. But I had a guaranteed deal with Lawrence. The contracts were ready to sign this morning. Were they really? I asked with feigned innocence. You might want to examine the details more carefully. Lawrence Technologies has been in our acquisition pipeline for nearly a year. We've simply been waiting for the perfect strategic moment to finalize the transaction. Our. His voice cracked noticeably. Who exactly is our? My executive team. My company. My financial empire, I stated, pausing between each declaration to let the reality sink deeper. The one I've been methodically building while you were busy dismissing my career as insignificant. The line went abruptly silent. Nadine, struggling to maintain her professional composure, looked at me with barely contained excitement. How long do you estimate before your parents call? She glanced at her watch. As if orchestrated, my mother's name immediately illuminated my screen. Evelyn. Isabella Foster's voice was sharp enough to shatter crystal. What on earth have you done? Good morning, Mother. I'm quite occupied at the moment, but perhaps we could discuss everything over dinner tonight? Dinner? Are you completely oblivious to what's happening? Your father's phone hasn't stopped ringing. The Bradshaws, the club board members, everyone is demanding to know how our librarian daughter has secretly built a multi-billion-dollar investment firm. I could hear my father in the background, his voice uncharacteristically flustered. Tell her to come to the house immediately, he demanded. I have back-to-back meetings throughout the day, I responded truthfully. The Lawrence acquisition was merely the first move in today's carefully orchestrated strategy. However, I'd be delighted to host everyone at my residence this evening. Shall we say 6 o'clock? Your residence? Mother's voice dripped with skepticism. You mean that modest townhouse near the library? No, I mean my penthouse on Calm Avenue. I'll text you the address shortly. A prolonged silence followed. The comeuppance building? The most exclusive address in the city? Is it? I hadn't really noticed. See you at 6, Mother. After ending the call, I drew a deep breath, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. 8 years of carefully guarded secrets were finally exposed. 8 years of meticulous planning and maintaining an elaborate facade while constructing something truly extraordinary. Ready for Phase 3 of today's strategy? Nadine asked, her eyes bright with anticipation. I nodded decisively. Release the second announcement. This one carried even greater significance than the first. Foster Global Ventures announces strategic merger with East Asian technology conglomerate, deal valued at $70 billion. This merger had been in development for over 6 months, a calculated move to solidify our position as a dominant force in the global marketplace. We had timed it precisely to follow the Lawrence Tech acquisition for maximum impact. By the time my family arrived for dinner, the business world would still be reeling from 2 of the decade's most significant financial maneuvers, both orchestrated by someone they had consistently underestimated, the quiet, bookish librarian. The day unfolded through a series of precisely scheduled activities, executive meetings, strategic planning sessions, and a single carefully selected interview. I spoke exclusively with the Wall Street Journal's senior financial correspondent, explaining how my background in information sciences had provided the perfect foundation for building a global investment empire. In today's economy, information isn't just power, it's the ultimate currency, I told the reporter, articulating a philosophy that bridged my 2 seemingly disparate worlds. By early evening, I stepped away from the library's public facade and traveled to what was truly my domain, the 3-story penthouse atop the exclusive comeuppance building that had served as my actual residence for the past 6 years. While I maintained a modest townhouse near the library to preserve appearances, it was here in this architectural masterpiece where my most significant work occurred. My private elevator opened directly into a vast living space that made Blake's corporate headquarters look modest by comparison. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a panoramic view of the city and harbor, while state-of-the-art technology discreetly integrated throughout the space connected me to operations across 6 continents. Nadine had arranged for dinner to be catered by Maison Laurent, a Michelin-starred restaurant that, not coincidentally, was among Foster Global Ventures' more pleasurable acquisitions. The dining area was arranged with precisely the right balance of understated luxury and refined taste that subtly communicated old-money confidence. At exactly 6 p.m., the elevator announced my family's arrival. Blake was first to emerge, his typical swagger replaced by barely contained rage. My parents followed, both looking as though they'd witnessed something fundamentally impossible. Even Joseph, who had accompanied them, appeared profoundly disoriented, struggling to reconcile his image of the family's underachiever with the evidence of extraordinary success surrounding him. "Welcome to my home," I greeted them, gesturing toward the sweeping cityscape beyond the windows. "How long has this been going on?" Blake demanded, his voice taut with tension. "How long have I been deceiving you, is that what you're asking?" I clarified, moving unhurriedly toward the custom-designed bar to pour myself a measure of rare single malt. "I've never actually lied about anything. I am genuinely a librarian. I truly love books and information. I also happen to run one of the world's most successful private investment firms." "But why the secrecy?" Mother collapsed onto an Italian leather sofa, visibly shaken. "Why let us believe all this time that you were a disappointment?" I finished for her, offering a glass of her preferred champagne. "Perhaps because none of you ever looked beyond your own assumptions. You saw exactly what you expected to see, a daughter who chose books over the family business tradition." Father stood transfixed by the windows, gazing out at the skyline where several buildings now belonged to my company. "All these years," he murmured. "All those mysterious market moves, the acquisitions no one could trace, that was you?" "Foster Global Ventures," Blake stated flatly. "The shadow organization everyone in the industry has been trying to identify. The competitive force that's been reshaping entire market sectors." I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. It does have a certain dramatic quality, doesn't it? Though I prefer to think of it as an information empire. After all, isn't that what you always emphasized, Dad? Knowledge is the ultimate source of power. He turned to face me, his expression transformed as frustration gave way to dawning respect. "The Lawrence Technologies acquisition," he said slowly. "How long have you been orchestrating that?" "About 8 months for the final phase," I explained, "though we've controlled a significant interest in their subsidiary operations for over a year." Blake's expression shifted from anger to stunned disbelief. "You've been deliberately working against me this entire time?" "Not working against you, Blake. Competing in the marketplace. Isn't that precisely what you've always claimed to want? A genuine challenge to prove your business acumen?" "This wasn't fair competition," he erupted. "You had hidden resources, inside information." "Inside information?" I laughed, the sound resonating through the spacious room. "You mean like the kind you regularly boast about obtaining through your country club connections? The deals you negotiate during golf tournaments and on private yachts?" "No, Blake. I built this company through intelligence, strategic patience, and a fundamental understanding of how information flows drive market opportunities." Setting my glass down with a gentle clink against the marble countertop, I surveyed my stunned family. This enterprise was created through skill and strategy, not merely through capital and connections. Success in today's world isn't just about who you know, it's about what you know and how effectively you apply that knowledge. It was within the quiet sanctuary of the Central Library that I had discovered my greatest competitive advantage, one invisible to those who judged value by appearance alone. A week after the initial revelation, we gathered for another dinner in my penthouse. The atmosphere was markedly different, tension remained, but it had transformed into something productive. My mother surveyed the carefully curated art collection adorning the walls, her eyes lingering on an original Monet. "All this time you've had all this," she remarked, gesturing to our surroundings with a blend of awe and confusion still evident in her voice. My father, unusually quiet, seemed lost in reflection, perhaps mentally revisiting every business decision he had made over the past decade, wondering how many had been influenced by his overlooked daughter's invisible hand. The table setting alone must have cost more than most people's annual salary, my mother observed, breaking the uncomfortable silence. I never imagined you having such expensive taste. The porcelain is 18th century Meissen, I replied with a light smile, but I'm more interested in discussing the strategic partnership opportunity one mentioned on the phone. Blake, who had spent the week fielding uncomfortable questions from his board of directors, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. You can't seriously expect me to believe you want to collaborate after deliberately undermining my Lawrence Tech acquisition. I'm not offering out of sentiment, I explained, laying out financial projections that Nadine had prepared. Foster Enterprises has strong market positioning but is over-leveraged and lacks technological innovation pathways. What I'm proposing isn't charity, it's smart business. A modernization strategy that incorporates global perspective and advanced analytical frameworks. My father studied the projections with growing interest. These integration models are remarkably sound, he admitted, looking at me with new eyes. This would position both companies for exponential growth. It would give Blake an opportunity to lead something truly transformative, I added, watching comprehension dawn across their faces. This wasn't about humiliation, it was about evolution. As the evening progressed, our conversation evolved from awkward confrontation to genuine dialogue. I shared select details about building my company from scratch, explaining how my library position had provided the perfect observational post from which to study information patterns and market behaviors undistracted by industry groupthink. The change in Blake was perhaps most remarkable. His initial defensiveness gradually yielded to reluctant respect and even tentative engagement with the partnership concept. By dessert, he was asking substantive questions about international market strategy. Near midnight, as we finished the last of an exceptional Bordeaux, my mother asked the question that had clearly been troubling her. Why reveal everything now, Evelyn? After 8 years of secrecy? I considered my answer carefully. Success doesn't always wear the expected uniform, I replied. Sometimes it's important to challenge our assumptions about what achievement looks like. About who's capable of what. It's a rather powerful reminder not to judge based on appearances, Blake added unexpectedly, examining his reflection in his wine glass. A lesson I'm learning rather dramatically. After my family departed, Nadine and I reviewed the day's market performance on the terrace. Foster Global Ventures stock had risen another 12%, and early response to the proposed merger was overwhelmingly positive. The official merger announcement is scheduled for next week, Nadine noted. Do you think Blake will fully commit to the partnership by then? He's pragmatic beneath the bravado, I replied. And this offers him a path forward that preserves his dignity while actually teaching him something valuable. This evening had marked more than a business discussion, it represented a fundamental realignment of perceptions and possibilities. As I reflected on the night's emotional landscape, certain moments stood out vividly, my mother's tearful apology for years of dismissive comments, my father's expression of genuine pride when he finally saw me clearly, and Blake's grudging acknowledgement that he might have something to learn from his bookish sister. They were beginning the difficult process of reconciling their long-held assumptions with a reality that contradicted everything they thought they knew about success, about me, and perhaps about themselves. The following morning, I arrived at the library at my usual time, allowing the familiar rhythm of the place to center me amid the whirlwind of change. I greeted the regular patrons, retired Professor Jones with his constitutional history research, the group of nursing students preparing for exams, Mrs. Abernathy checking out her weekly mystery novels. None of them treated me differently, despite my face appearing on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and every major financial publication. This, perhaps, was my most meaningful achievement. In a world obsessed with status symbols and external validation, I had created something genuine, a dual existence that honored both my passion for knowledge and my talent for strategic thinking. The library remained my spiritual home, a place where value wasn't measured by market capitalization. As I helped a young student locate resources for her research paper, I realized I had no intention of abandoning this role. I was simultaneously Evelyn Foster, the unassuming head librarian who remembered everyone's name and research interests, and E.V. Foster, the billionaire CEO whose financial strategies were now being studied in business schools. After all, information takes many forms, and true influence often originates from unexpected sources. Sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the quiet one whom everyone underestimates, the one silently turning pages while others are busy making noise.